Good evening, all.
Good evening.
As Karen explained, I'm Stacy Spell, and tonight I'm not going to tell you a story of beekeeping or of community organizing or adventures in the wild. I'm going to tell you a story of what has shaped me and the man that I am today, where I come from, and some of the individuals that had a lasting impact on me. For this journey, you need not go far. You are seated in the midst of it. I am from the community of New Hallville, shaped and nurtured. In 1955, at 6 months old, my family and I arrived 2 blocks away from here on Division Street. So if you go out the driveway, make a right, make a left, you're on Division Street. And my family arrived here from Greenville, North Carolina. And we arrived at the home of a prosperous cousin who was known for coming to the country where we were from, the farming community, which was like the equivalent of Dixwell Avenue, where all these families that are major families here in New Haven lived. And he would bring people that wanted to leave the farm life, that were tired of farming and heard of the jobs that could be found in the north. And we arrived here on Division Street, and New Hallville became family central, became home for probably the majority of my adult life, up until I came back to the community from the Army. New Hallville then was not what we see today. It was a vibrant community made up of factories that my father, who would tell anyone that would listen that a man could leave a job in the morning, quit, I had enough, and be on another job in the afternoon in this community. From where you're seated, there were factories. This was a major factory, the gun factory. And then there was the brass mill. And then there was G&O. And there was a number of other factories. But it was a place that left lasting memories of men walking home with their lunch boxes. Men coming home tired, proud. In those days, this is the early 60s, white flight hadn't totally occurred. New Hallville was still probably 3/4 black and 1/4 white. The irony is that the place that I came to be, where I started to have memories, was in the neighborhood that I live in now. My memories came at 4 and 5 years old in West River. My family lived in a 3rd floor apartment, 2 doors in on Orchard Street from Legion Avenue, where a tire shop was run by a Greek family that had a little blonde Greek girl who happened to have a serious crush on me at 4 years old. That's another story to itself. But we moved from Orchard Street, where I just started school, Scranton Street School. It's still there, it's a doctor's book. And I had started school, and we moved to Shelton Avenue. And directly across from where we lived was Abraham Lincoln School. Now, most of you won't even remember this building. This building has been long torn down. It was an old brick schoolhouse with the wooden front steps. The girls' entrance on one side, the boys' entrance on the other. And this would become the bedrock of my foundation for my beginning years. In starting kindergarten, I can remember vividly the first day going in. In those days, if it rained, children wore boots. You wore your rain boots, and you wore your raincoat. And going into the school, and starting off, and the school day ending, and I'm the only kid whose mother, even though we lived right across the street, my mother is standing at the corner to wait for me, to walk me home 3 doors down. There was a gentleman who would also come to shadow my life. His name was William Reeves. And he had a storefront where you could buy penny candy. And he was industrious. entrepreneurial, and the thing that stood out about him was he was missing his left arm. And this man ran businesses my entire life. He would become known in our community because he ran a tire shop. If your tire, if you got a flat, or you needed a tire fixed, this one-armed man would raise your car up with one arm and turn the lug wrench, change your tire, and do this all without any assistance. He had many children, and he was stern. But even in his sternness, there was a love. He was someone that had no problem in passing out candy to the kids in the neighborhood, or giving a good word or a good smile. But this man would be with me, as I said, my entire life. As my family prospered, we moved just like most families at that time. The farther you moved up Shelton Avenue or Winchester Avenue or Dixville, the more you prospered. And we moved from Shelton Avenue to Star Street. Now, Star Street in those days was the closest thing to Disney World in New Haven. We were surrounded by black-owned businesses, butcher shops, pharmacies. Every corner had a pharmacy. For where we lived, there was Nasty's Pharmacy on the corner of New Hall and Star, where they had the old soda jerks where you could pull up a stool and get a malted milk. I don't even think most kids know what a malted milk is. Or you could get a pistachio, a milkshake, or a banana split. On the corner of Shelton and Thompson was another pharmacy. And then you went to the corner of Ivy and New Hall, where there was Benza's. Again, the men were known as industrious. The men of my family made sure that you had the understanding that if you don't work, you don't eat. That a man that doesn't work can't take care of himself, let alone take care of somebody else. Whether it's your mother, whether it's your children, whether it's someone that you like. But a man had to work. So my father was a man that for the majority of his life worked 2 jobs. He not only worked a full-time job in the daytime, most times he worked a part-time job at night, and then when we really had desires to own our own home, he worked 2 full-time jobs. My father did this all the way up until the 60s. My father and men like Mr. Reeves, they were the type of men that could outwork a Georgia mule. The Georgia mule working next to them would say, "Come on, William Noble, stop! It's time for a break." But these men were industrious. They made sure that their families had. Where we lived on Star Street, directly behind our house, was a black police officer by the name of Clarence Huff. And the irony is that Clarence Huff would go on to be my drill master at the New Haven Police Academy. But in those days, I was so enamored of looking at this policeman going and coming to work. Now, I played with his children. He was very stoic. But there was a pride in the neighborhood that here was a policeman that was part of our community. He was someone that other young people emulated and wanted to be. At that time, I had no desire in thinking about being a policeman, but realizing later on the impact of seeing this man go to work, take care of his family, serve, and protect. 2 doors down from him was another gentleman who would be with me the majority of my life. And his name was John Howard. And John Howard was known in our community because he started off with a blue Ford pickup. And he went around daily with the loudspeaker selling eggs and watermelons and vegetables. He also had a disfigured right hand. And he openly carried a .38. on his left side. I can't say I knew of anyone ever testing him or ever trying to rob him. But this was a man who, I wouldn't want to say, had 5 daughters and 1 son. This man would keep me in dollars from the time I was 13 to the time I was 19 and went in the Army. This is a man that, for those that don't know Howard, the Howard name, Howard Skins, if you go into some of the stores, you will see Howard Skins. He makes pork rinds. But in those days, he made sausage. And he made liver pudding, which is like almost like livers, and hog head cheese. And I learned to make this at 13 years old. And my job was to load a 100-pound vat of meat, and then put it into a 50-pound canister, and then start off cranking it so that his son could hold it with the skins, and it would come out and it would make the sausage, and we'd fill up the tubs. Well, I became a fast learner. And I learned to do the job by myself. So not only could I load the meat, put on the skins, I could crank out the sausage by myself. Mr. Howard was a kind man, not educated, never would claim to be educated, but he raised his family, and again was someone that looked out for those in the community. In those days, New Hallville was not beset with the violence that we see now. There were one spot where you could buy a beer and a shot. They used to call them neighborhood bars. I think this one was called Sugar Hill. And it was on the corner of Thompson and Shelton Avenue. And you would see the men stop in there and get a beer, get a shot. And the bar closed shortly after dinner. But you didn't see the violence that we saw now. The only time that we would see violence is my sister and I would have to go to church on Sunday. And the church we worshiped at then was Union Temple, which was then a storefront. And a radio program was run out of it on Sunday mornings. And there was a bar on the corner by the name of the Royal Garden. Now the Royal Garden, for the most part, you didn't see men fighting outside of it. You didn't hear of any ruckus. But for some reason, Saturday nights, Sunday morning, walking to church, you couldn't help but notice the blood on the sidewalk and the broken glass. As I said, my family was centered in New Hallville. You could not throw a rock without hitting a family member. We were everywhere. I come from the second biggest black family here in the city of New Haven. The only family bigger than mine are called the Huckabees. And I'm sure everybody here, a lot of people know who the Huckabees are. But I come from a family that was centered here in New Hallville. As I said, we were on every block from Munson Street going all the way down to the Hamden Town line. On every block, no exaggeration. It made for good, strong family ties. It made for a good sense of community, because it was impossible to walk down the street and let alone have a salty mouth and let Miss Jenkins hear you say something. Boy, what did you say? Oh. And she would give you a good stern talking to, and before you got home, guess what? Mom knew about it. You had to deal with Mom. And I would rather deal with Mom, I would rather deal with Dad than deal with Mom. And then by the time Dad came home, you had to deal with Dad. Our families continued to prosper, and we moved further up Shelton Avenue, right over the line. When you come to the end of Shelton Avenue, you come to Morris Street in Hamden. And you could not tell my siblings, me and my siblings, that we had not joined the world of Leave It to Beaver. You could not tell me that Ward and June Cleaver didn't live next door, even though they moved out shortly after we moved out. But there weren't the tensions that we had in New Hallville. And going to Abraham Lincoln School, I was labeled a talented and gifted child. And I was lucky to have teachers like Barbara Moss, who was this beautiful sister that lived here in the community, taught in the community, worshiped in the community, who had no problem showing up at your doorstep and saying, letting your mother know, oh, Stacy was having a problem in school today. Or showing up at your doorstep to let your mom know that Stacy was being great and was doing well in school. We don't see that anymore where we have teachers that live in our active and vibrant part of our community. But this was new. One of the other teachers that I had was Dr. Richard Walker, who was a child psychologist who was on sabbatical for 2 years. He was my 4th and 5th grade teacher. He was my first male teacher. He was a teacher that planted the seeds of adventure and reading. He created a voracious reader in me. He expanded the world of a little black boy from New Hallville, bringing him to the Cape with a couple of other classmates, that he would get permission from our parents, and we would travel with him. And we'd end up on the Cape. And he planted that seed of love that I have for Cape Cod still to this day. Cape Cod and I have a serious romance going on. He also brought us to boarding schools in New Hampshire, and he introduced us to worlds that I might not have ever found except at looking on the television. His kindness, his encouragement. Now keep in mind, this is the early 60s. And he's telling little black boys, the world is yours. There is nothing you cannot attain if you work hard for it. And just as my father would say, you don't get anything unless you work. Dr. Walker encouraged us to dare to be different, dare to read about travel, dare to read about foreign places. Study, do all you can, and that the world truly is your world. And the last person that had such a profound effect on me from Abraham Lincoln School was Dr. Charles Twyman. Now, for a lot of you might not know that name, but he's someone that, to this day, on my desk at work, I have a 2009 commemorative card from the founders of the Freddie Fixer. Dr. Twyman was one of them. Dr. Twyman was this huge giant of a man with this voice that made Paul Robeson sound like a tenor. Deep voice. A presence that when he walked into the room, all eyes were on him. When he walked down the street, you could not help but look at this man, his stately nature, the way that he carried himself. And the most profound lesson he left on me was as a result of myself and a young man by the name of Sibilak getting into a fight at recess on the playground. In those days, we still had recess. And we got into a fight. Well, I tried to do the best I could. And he hit me in the eye. Dr. Twyman comes out and breaks up the fight. And he brings us to his office. Now, I've never been to the principal's office. I'm scared to death of this giant. But that wasn't enough. He proceeded to take us into the basement of the school. Now, in those days, the schools had boiler rooms, which were 2 levels below the basement. And he proceeded to walk us down these stairs. And he had the stern talking to us. He didn't yell at us. But he intimated with his belt. The last thing that 2 little black boys need to be doing is fighting one another. That there are things that are going to happen in life that we need to be fighting together, and that we need to stand together, and that we're going to need each other. the coming years. I didn't truly understand it then, but as I grew older, I got it. And I live by it to this day. I'm still more intimidated by him taking off his belt, but I got the message. In New Home, as we moved into Hampton, the same kids that I grew up with here in New Haven, going to school at Abraham Lincoln, their families prospered. And they moved up Winchester Avenue and Dixwell Avenue. And we all ended up attending Michael J. Whalen Junior High School, where the talented and gifted child became just another A student. But New Hallville was never far from my life because we worship here. My aunts, my uncle, my grandparents lived here. We got our hair cut here. Our family stayed so close together that it was nothing for my mother to be able to say, Stacy, go around the corner to Florence, get that blouse because I'm getting a blouse from her that I'm going to wear to work. Or for another Aunt Margie to say, go over Mad's house and get this. That's how close our family stayed. And the irony was that when I joined the police force, I came home from the Army and I became a policeman in this community. Someone had the sense of humor, that's putting it lightly, to put this big bruiser who was just home out of the Army, who was supposed to be a tough guy, let's put him in New Hallville walking. A young girl child had been killed and raped, and her body found dumped on Lilac Street and placed under a ceramic tub. And the community was in an uproar. And there had not been any walking beats in New Hallville probably since the 40s. And I was sent to New Hallville to walk by myself. Needless to say, for those who thought they were going to humble me, I was home. I would walk from the police department down Dixwell Avenue, down Division Street, and my beat was from Division Street to Bassett Street to Newhall Street and around. In those days, there were no places to eat. There were no places to get coffee. The closest place was a bakery that closed in the evening on the corner of Dixwell and Bassett. But in walking New Hallville, it created the policeman that I was to become. Because even though I arrived at a time of violence and the community was in an uproar, I was met by Captain Charles Grady, who's retired. And this eloquent, charming man gave me my marching orders, told me what to look out for, and to remember to treat people as I would treat my own Nana, my own auntie, and my own uncle or my grandpa. And I walked. So it was not unnatural to stand at the fence of Mrs. Jenkins talking for a half an hour about her flowers, or to stop at the cleaners and talk to Mr. Thorpe about fishing, or to stop here and there. It was true community policing in effect, but see, then we didn't call it community policing. For me, it was doing what I knew to be natural. I knew that I could not fight everyone. I knew that I did not want to fight everyone. And the key was the relationships. Those relationships that I created, that were created, and that were established in those beginning days of 1978, stayed with me until 2006 when I retired. Now that I've retired, I've left police work in a sense. Now I work on reducing gun violence in the city as part of the program, being program manager for Project Longevity. For me, it's still building community. It's still about engaging people. It's still about practicing the legacy of Dr. Charles Twyman, of us uplifting our own communities, not waiting for downtown to clean up or look for us, but for us to empower our own communities. It's about the entrepreneurial spirit of Mr. John Howard and Deacon Willie Reeves, that in spite of their handicaps, they didn't see any handicaps. They did not want pity. They only embodied a proud spirit. And they only believed in building up our community. Most of my family still lives here, right here in New Moreville. Though it's generations past where there used to be a time where we all knew family names. So I knew that if you were a Kilpatrick, I knew who your parents were. I knew if you were a Harper, like my babysitter who used to be on Winchester Avenue as Supreme Court Luby Harper's mother, Cousin Gladys. Everybody had the title cousin. When I first started working narcotics, one of the first things that I would always hear in the doors being crashed in is, Cousin Stacy! So even though the generations have come down the line and they don't know Cousin Stacy and they can't piece together how a Denby is related to a Carr and how a Brown is related to a Spell and who's doubly related because we had two sisters who married two brothers. But we are still here. My first cousin Gary Spell lives on Shelton Avenue, directly across from Lincoln Bassett School. It's the house that he was born in. His son is Jacob Spell, who sits on the Board of Education and is on his way to Yale. We're still very much here. Some of the elders wanted to sell their homes well before the crack 80s happened, and were never able to do so. But in the role that I'm in now, I'm still trying to live the lessons learned, impact those lessons of being a unifier in our community, being an edifier, build up, don't tear down. Remember Mr. Twyman, there's no reason for black boys to be fighting black boys. There's no reason for brown boys to be killing brown boys. To building respect and dignity and creating change in the way that they left that lasting impression. The last thing that I would say, those things, the main thing that I learned from them were these are men that proved, don't tell us what we can't do, because we'll show you what we can. With that, I thank you.
Stacy's open to a couple questions. Is there anything you'd like to hear more about?
Don't be scared.
I see hearing.
All these mentors that you have you ever, or did you ever get the chance to thank them or tell them what they mean to you?
Yes. And that's a blessing in itself. To be able to stand next to Dr. Twyman. And Dr. Twyman, he just passed a couple of years ago. And I would see him always shocked. And to approach him and to realize, oh, I'm bigger than you are. You're not that big. But to be able to sit down with him and to tell him the impact that he had on my life. That the things that I learned from him, I am still embodying, utilizing to clean up my community. Not waiting for others to do. Creating community cohesion that we can do this together. That we don't have to wait on downtown to be the cavalry. We are the cavalry. For Dr. Walker, Dr. Walker's office was at Gazelle Institute at the top of the hill at Edward and Prospect. And to be able to sit down with him for a half hour. And again, and I was in uniform. I mean, in those days, I was in uniform. And to be able to sit with him And I'm almost bawling my eyes out. You know, cops don't cry. But to tell this man the impact and the legacy that he left on my life. Mr. Reeves sat on the deacon board at the church where I worship, where we've always worshiped. And now I'm a deacon. And to be able to tell him the effect that he had on my life. And to see that spirit. I mean, to see a one-armed man make his living changing tires by himself. Not waiting for a handout, but making his way in life. John Howard, I would see him on Winchester Avenue. And he was one of those that was, said, Stacy, you let that drunk guy talk that trash to you. Mr. Howard, he's drunk. Stacy, if I was you, I'd But to be able to tell Mr. Howard the economic independence that he created in a young man. I was a movie buff. And I love going to the movies. And I would go to the movies on a Saturday afternoon. And if we would have to go to church, and I taught my mom to let me sneak out of church early. And I would go to the movies again. And my mom couldn't turn me down because I had my own money. My parents didn't like the way I dressed as I became a teen. Because this is the time of the 70s, late 60s. Wearing those moccasin boots. Those jeans have holes in them. That shirt, what kind of shirt is that? As for a mother who wanted you to be an escort to the debutante ball and wanted you to aspire to those things that definitely were not my thing. Yes, I had a chance to thank all of them.
We have time for one more question.
Are you married?